What's going on, everybody? Today we got a little Honda Element here. It's been kicking my tail for several months now. It's a 2005, and the customer concern is a stalling issue when it's cold. Basically, first start in the morning and you try to take off in it, you'll get it to stall a few times until it gets some heat built up in the engine. And it's been here since February. It is now almost the end of September, and I've yet to figure out what's causing this issue. So let's see if we can figure it out. Alright, so I've not started at all today, and yep, stalled. Okay, cranked and run. And sometimes to get it to act up is most of the time just putting it in gear, but sometimes it's once you move a little bit and it may not even act up anymore. There it goes. Stall. And we'll put it back in neutral. Yeah. It'll do this usually a few times. I am about out of gas, and see, we just stalled it again. And usually if you put it in neutral real fast and try to crank it, it has a low cadence sound, like a compression issue. Let's see if it'll do it. Couldn't really probably hear that, but you have to kind of do it fast. The faster you can do it, the more it'll act up for you. But we're already starting to get too warm. Yeah, so that's the customer's concern, and it'll keep doing this, like I said, until it gets some heat in the engine. And yeah, for the customer, it never would set the codes, and the customer is a wholesaler, basically. He bought it. Well, he's not a wholesaler, he's a retailer. He bought it to put on his car lot, and it's been having this issue, so he's not been able to sell the car because it does this. And for him, it never would set a code, and they just kept having this issue. And as long as you basically do this, it doesn't really set a code. You have to kind of drive it for a while, and it finally would set a rich code for me. And every now and then it'll set a misfire code. I think I've got the misfire mostly took care of. I'll get into that in a few minutes. But yeah, I've not really been able to nail down or pinpoint the cause of this stall, other than I know the ECM at least thinks it's running rich, and the way it drives, it quite possibly could be running rich, but nothing really indicates it is running rich other than data. So very confusing car, and so we're just going to go back through all the data that I've collected, recollect some data, and kind of go over all the testing that I've done with this car that I've still not been able to determine what the issue really is. Alright, so just doing a quick visual inspection. Everything is normal, nothing's out of place, everything is connected, no hoses off, nothing dry rotted and cracked and falling off or anything like that. Everything looks original, specifically like the injectors and stuff. They're all dirty and stuff. They all look original. Coils are all original except for this one. Ignore this missing. The other stud is in the car. But this is a new coil because I'll show you in a minute, but I was having a kind of an intermittent misfire, mostly on number 4. When I pulled all the coils out, this number 4 was drastically different looking than the rest. So I just went ahead and replaced it as kind of a preventative thing, and it did clear up my misfire a little bit. I also put 4 new plugs in this thing because they had cheap auto locks. But overall, everything in here looks fine. Nothing looks like it's been really tampered with. So yeah, visual inspection doesn't really reveal anything to note. Okay, so let's get the scan tool hooked up and look at some data. On the Topdon Phoenix Smart here, I've got a complete pre-scan done. As you can see right now, currently there is no codes in this thing. I've actually haven't cleared codes in a while because no codes have come back. So let's just go into the engine control module and look at some live data with this thing. Currently, engine's not running. I want to show some kind of cold start data while it's still relatively cold. And Hondas notoriously take a long time to do scans, and yeah. Let's see, what would we want to look at? Well, I guess we could look at everything. There's 86 PIDs. It's not really a whole lot to really sort through, I guess. So we'll just take all of them and we'll crank this thing, see what happens. And right now you can see our air fuel average and short term basically here. Right now we're 4% on long term. Short terms are going to start dropping a little bit. Right now it's 8%, 9%, and probably if I put it in drive, we'll probably stall. Not yet, but yeah, you can see our short term keeps going lower and lower. This is a wideband sensor, so if you guys are like me, you struggle with widebands. I don't know about y'all, but I really do. I struggle with them. It seems like everybody does them a little differently. Your data's different with everybody. Some of them won't even give you long-term, short-term kind of stuff like this. But as you can see, our short-term keeps going further and further down. With these widebands on this particular system, you want a 1. 1 is where it wants to be. Anything over, it is taking out fuel. Anything lower, it is, well, hang on. Anything over is adding fuel to bring it back down. Anything lower, it is subtracting fuel to bring it back up. Yeah, it's kind of confusing. So you can see our actual lambda down there is 1, or is trying to maintain 1, and our short terms have dropped down to 0.8, so that's basically 20%. Our long terms are still only 4%. So, and then you see our commanded air fuel ratio. So this AF sensor reading in milliamps. I'm wideband. I don't know. This one I guess reads in current versus voltage. What we're all used to is short, narrow bands. So it seems currently right now that it's happy with a total trim of about 26, 27, somewhere around in there. So taking out a pretty good bit of fuel. It is starting to kind of lug the engine just a little bit. I don't know if you guys will be able to hear it or not, but RPMs have definitely dropped some. So let's get down there to that. See our RPMs. We'll look at misfires real quick. So you can see we got a misfire on number 1 or number 4, just one of them. I was getting a pretty consistent misfire on number 4. It has gotten a lot better, but we still get it, and sometimes we get it on number 3 as well. But as you can see, number 4 is counting up pretty good right now, and you can kind of feel it in the engine. RPMs ain't really shaking, but I don't know if you guys will be able to hear it or not, but we've got number 4 misfire. And temperature wise, we're up to 170 degrees. So engine speed, almost 700 RPM, probably about what the average is, what it's wanting. That number 4 misfire is kind of a pretty bad right now this morning. Let's see, is there anything else really of importance? IAC command is basically 11%. Intake air temperature sensor, 77 degrees. Let's see, where's our manifold vacuum? So map sensor, 0.67 7 psi. So that's seems like a pretty good vacuum. Let's see. Don't really think there's a whole lot left. No. Yeah, everything looks pretty good. So, what could we do first? Let's take and just cycle the key off and on. So we are not running at all. And we may have to back out of this thing. I want to see some data with just engine off, if it'll tell us anything. Specifically that map sensor. I want to just verify that that map sensor is reading correctly. Come on, where are you at? So right now it's saying 14.5 psi, 14.7. So let's see, that's pretty close to where I'm at. Alright, so I just downloaded a Bear app real fast. It tells me my elevation, my barometric pressure here, and it's pretty close. This is a little over what my app is saying I'm at, but this also could be just a little off and probably wouldn't matter a whole bunch. So to me, this doesn't seem drastically off. It thinking a higher pressure would make my elevation lower, so it would give just a little bit more fuel, but I don't think that it's going to be that much difference because I'm only at 1,000 feet elevation gain, or elevation from sea level, so I don't think a couple of 100 feet is going to make a difference. So that looks okay. Like I said, could be wrong, but it looks okay. So where would you guys go from here? Basic data looks like we're rich. We're pulling fuel out. Temperature sensors seem to be pretty accurate. Our map sensor looks pretty accurate. This is a density system, a speed density system, so there's no mass airflow sensor on this. We do have that misfire with number 4. That's pretty consistent. But how would one misfire, it's not even a consistent misfire, it's just a random misfire. How would that one misfire cause such a rich condition? at least on scan data anyways. So where would you guys go? For me, I've kind of been all over this thing several times, so it's really hard for me to really pinpoint a place to go, but I guess we could look at a secondary waveform maybe of this number 4 while it's misfiring. Alright, we got the scope rolling, we got the Topdon recording. As you can see, we've got a misfire on 2 counting pretty good and misfire on number 4 counting good. So I'm just going to use my paddle probe here, and we're going to basically get some good captures, kind of get an idea of what these waveforms are looking like. So on 1, we can see how that one is looking. Let's go over here to 2. Pretty similar, slightly different, but pretty similar. Let's go to number 3. Basically kind of the same capture. And number 4, a little bit more different, but not a whole lot different. So let's go back to 3. So you can see our oscillation off the end of the burn line pretty good in these other cylinders. Okay. You can see that ringing in all of them, except for number 4. Number 4 has some oscillation, but not as pronounced. And scan data shows misfire up to 32. So that is definitely looking like I do have probably a slightly more rich condition in number 4 than the rest, if the rest are rich. So maybe we do have an issue isolated to number 4, maybe. But you can tell those waveforms are definitely different. So this is number 3. This is number 4. Number 3. Number 4. Definitely a difference on the tail oscillations there. So, do we have a fuel injector spraying too much fuel? It kind of looks maybe like that. So let's do a injector balance test where we drop fuel pressure on each one of them and see if they all drop the same amount of pressure. Alright, so I have my pressure gauge here set up. I'm just basically teed in with the lines here. And while we're at it, we're going to get a fuel sample, and on the Topdon, we're just going to turn the fuel pump on with the bidirectional control. It's going to make sure it's okay to operate, and we are. And right now it's running. We've got 50 pounds of pressure, so let's see if it can actually flow this, and hopefully this stays in my bottle here. So you can see we're getting a pretty good flow of volume there. Okay, and let off, we still get our 50 psi. So let's stop that. Fuel looks okay. No contaminants floating in there, no water, no nothing. It is a little old. This thing's been sitting here for quite a while, so I'm not really too concerned about how dark the fuel is. That would actually probably make it run a little lean, I would think. If fuel quality was poor, you'd be on the lean side, but that's just my thinking. So now let's take and hook up a little pulse tool to pulse each one of these injectors and see what our fuel pressure drop is. Alright, so we could use a scan tool to turn the pump on and off to get it primed. We basically let it run, turn it off, let it get rest and we're about 45 psi. And then I've got this little injector tester tool. You can get this on Amazon. It's where I got it. I'll put a link to it in my Amazon store that I've set up for everybody to kind of see the things I use. I did change the ends on this. I put smaller ends on it because the ends that come with were pretty big and they don't really clip on the injectors really well. So I changed the ends on mine, and we're going to use this medium setting here. And we're basically just going to tell it to pulse and watch our fuel pressure drop. So you can see we dropped down to 29.5 roughly. And we can move to the next injector. And we need to reprime this. We can either do it with the scan tool, or we can do the old key off, key back on method. So just turn the key off for a couple seconds, turn it back on, and I could hear the pump run. And there we go, we're back at 45 psi. Pulse test, and you can see just under 30, pretty much the same as their number 1. Let's go on down to the next one. I'll just cycle the key again because that's really faster than doing the scan tool. Back to 45 and pulse. That one just right around 30, maybe just barely under. You can kind of see the line of the 30 there. So far everything is pretty much the same. Let's go down to number 4, one of our suspected bad cylinders. We'll get this reprimed. Back up to our 45 psi and pulse, and there we go. Pretty much the same across the board. So if we had one injector spraying more than the other injectors, we'd see it right here. They're all pretty identical. I think Bernie Thompson says you're allowed 1 or 2 psi drop from one to the next injector, so we are well within that. So where would you guys go from here? What would cause a rich condition? Well, if your injectors are spraying the same amount, that means you've got less air. So let's see if we've got a compression issue, breathability issue, or something like that. I think the easiest way for me, for the tooling I have, is basically just to go through and get an in-cylinder compression test on each one of these with the engine running, because that's going to give me the conditions that I'm having the issue with is running. So let's see what our running compression is on every cylinder. So we're going to start off with just basically number 1. I'm going to work my way down through here, kind of show you what I've got set up. Got the WPS 500 in the cylinder, hooked up to the Pico, which is in the car. And as I said in the beginning, I did change all the plugs. I put NGKs in them. As you can see, still looks pretty new. It does have a little fuel on it from when we was spraying the injectors, but I've also got injector number 1 unplugged, so we're not spraying fuel into the cylinder that we're not going to be firing. And right here I've got the original spark plugs that I took out, as well as the
number 4 coil. And as you guys can see, that coil is pretty rusty looking in comparison to this one. So this is why I changed it. I just didn't like it. It looked pretty rough. All the other ones looked like this. That looked pretty bad. So I replaced it purely because I was having this misfire issue and because of this. And I put plugs in it, well, because they went with the cheapest plugs you can get that guarantee you to return and buy more plugs, auto lots. So there's 2 of them. There's another one. Let's get a third one out here. And as you can see, these look relatively new too. They definitely do not look like they are experiencing a rich condition. None of them are black, sooty at all. I have no idea how long they were in there, but you could tell they were in there for a little bit of time at least. So that's was the first set of parts I threw at this thing, purely because I wanted to rule them out. I don't like that coil. That coil looks like it's had some issues. And then auto lots have issues. They're the worst plugs in the world. Don't buy auto lots. So yeah, garbage. And the coil might be bad, might be good, not really sure. It did seem like my misfire got better swapping it, but it's still there. So let's get the Pico fired up, get this thing running, and get us a compression waveform off of this cylinder. Alright, so on the Pico over here, I do, since I'm using a WPS 500, I did change the channel probe to the WPS 500. Let's see, right here. And got it on the 500 volt scale. That's what the WPS is set for in the range 1 setting. So right now we're at the 500 PSI range. We're probably not going to be anywhere near that. I'm probably going to drop that down to the 200 range to get some better detail. But let's crank this thing up and see what kind of waveforms we get. Yeah, and of course it's going to take a little bit to get running after giving some fuel in there. Just give it a little rev, get it to clean out a little bit. Alright, so yep, like I figured, let's get down. We can even go down to the 100 range. Let's put a trigger on this. There we go. So we can get this consistently in the frame. And there we go. You can see we've got a good even pocket here. We also have a good exhaust plateau where we're not building excessive pressure in the exhaust. The pressure seems to be pretty consistently running, let's see, 93, 94 PSI. So yeah, everything looks good with this cylinder. We can pause this and get some valve timing, and we'll basically compare each cylinder down the line to what we have. So here's what I'm doing. This is my cylinder 1, and I just kind of scrolled through all the waveforms, and they're all pretty much the same, no anomalies, so I just stopped on one. And I've got my timing, or my, what do they call these things? Phase rulers, I believe that's what they call it. Yeah, phase rulers. I got that turned on, basically set at my peak to peaks here. And so this would be 180 degrees, 360, 540, and back to 720 or 0. So what I'm doing here is measuring out my exhaust opening to closing / intake valve opening point. I'm going to screenshot all of these and also screenshot my intake valve opening to my intake valve closing. So we'll move this over here. This is about where intake pressure or crank, can't talk, my compression stroke starts building pressure. So that's my valve closing, and this would be where we start pulling in vacuum from the intake. So that would be my intake valve opening. So opening, closing, compression, and I'll screenshot this for every cylinder. So I have 2 screenshots, one with the exhaust, one with the intake, and compare all 4 cylinders. I changed my approach just a little bit. Instead of taking screenshots, I thought, well, this would be a good opportunity to do reference waveforms. So if you don't know what reference waveforms are, it's something Picoscope can do to where you can basically get a capture, you can save it as a reference, get a second capture, and basically overlay them. So as you can see, I've got already cylinder 1, 2, and 3, and I might redo number 1 because the engine is technically still getting up to temperature. So number 1 actually has slightly higher compression than the other 4. I think it was just because of the IAC was open a little more or something like that, letting it get a little extra air in. But what I've got is basically I set a trigger up, okay? And the way you do it is you get your capture. So basically let it roll, got me a capture. I set my phase ruler up, and pretty much I would just do each cylinder to where the phase rulers kind of lined up, and I would take that as a capture. So to save your reference waveforms, we'll do it for number 4 here. So basically you're going to hit the little more dot, go up to reference waveforms here. You're going to click that, and we're wanting to reference our channel A because that's what we're using right now. If we was wanting to reference B or C, like if we had multiple channels set up, you'd pick those, but we're going to pick A. And you can see it added right here, A2, all right? And so we're going to click on that. We're going to change some things to make this a little clearer. The way I like to do it is on the color chart here, I basically try to do kind of whatever color makes sense to me. So I start off with 1, 2, 3, and this is 4. So I'm just doing the colors as channel A, B, C, and D. And then I go like a shade lighter. So I'm going to pick this yellow color right here, and I'm going to rename this to cylinder 4 and click save. You don't technically have to save them, but if you wanted to use this later, you could. And I'm going to rename this to 4. But you only need to save it if you're going to use it. Like if you're going to close Picoscope, you need to reopen it later to use again. Like maybe you get called off of this job or whatever, and you need to come back later. You need to save it. Otherwise, you don't really have to. It'll be here for you. So that is how you basically save your reference waveforms. And let's get that going. So now, like if I hit the start button, we've got a trigger set up, but you can see our channel A is now flatlined, but we can still see all 4 channels back here. I know it's a little hard to see. Let me close, hang on, go away. There we go. Make that a little bit bigger. So if we zoom in here, actually let's pause this and turn that off. So we've got all 4 waveforms in here. So if we zoom in right here, you can see all 4 of them, and we have our phase ruler kind of lined up. You're rarely going to get these perfect. There is a way you can kind of shift them a little bit, but it's kind of a pain. So I just kind of get it pretty close, and it'll be fine. I mean, being a degree or 2 off isn't going to make that much of a difference. But as you can see, all 4 of our waveforms, aside from number 1 having a little bit higher compression because, like I said, this thing was still warming up, everything else overlays each other pretty well. Like our exhaust valve opening here, our exhaust plateau, our intake valve opening, and then where our intake valve closes and we start to build compression again. All of that matches pretty dang well. We've got even pockets on our exhaust, or our what do they call these? Exhaust pocket and intake pockets. They're nice and even. If you needed to, you can drag down some cursors here, and you actually have cursors for each one of your channels. So there you go. It's kind of like a way you can almost have like an 8-channel scope. Like if you need to scope a V8 or V6 that's got 2 cam sensors on each head and then a crank sensor, you really need a 5-channel scope to get all of those. Well, you can kind of do it this way and cheat it a little bit, where you can use your crank sensor and then one bank and then the crank sensor in another bank, and then line your crank sensor up and see all 4 of your cam sensors all in one capture. Real handy little trick to get you some fake more channels added in here. But like I say, sometimes getting them to line up is a little aggravating. Like my channel 1 is actually slightly off just a little bit, so if I needed to delay it, I could, but it's real aggravating. You've really got to be able to mess with it. And I think this can actually change to nanoseconds, I think, or maybe no, just let's do 0.5. So yeah, see, that got my compression lined back up here just a little bit better. So you can tweak these, you can, but it takes some finesse. Anyways though, our compression waveforms and our valve timing waveforms all spot on with each other. Timing wise, in actual mechanical engine timing, we could have an issue that would cause a rich condition, but just by eyeballing it, that looks spot on. I will tell you that I have a cam crank off of this engine. It does have 2 cam sensors, so you can actually see both intake and exhaust cam timing, as well as the crank in relation to each other. And I compared them to a known good that I found, and it's spot on. It's 1 degree off from a known good. 1 degree is nothing. It's insignificant. So timing looks good. Compression looks pretty good. You can see all 4 of them kind of are around the 75 psi hot idle, except for that cylinder number 1. But like I said, it was still warming up some, so I'm not worried about that. If I retook that capture, I'm sure it would be a little bit lower. But everything looks good so far. So let's get the scan tool hooked back up. Let's drive this thing and get some more data while we're driving it. Before we go on driving this thing, there was one more test that I wanted to go over and do before I forgot about it. And it's on the scope here, basically a intake pulse and exhaust pulse. Just trying to get a baseline of how the valves are doing, making sure everything looks even. We do have a slight misfire every now and then on number 4. It's gotten hot enough now where that's pretty much cleared up and not happening. And as we can see, I've got a trigger on number 1 coil command, and our red trace channel 2 is intake pulse sensor. The green is the exhaust pulse. I'm actually using the WPS because I'm terrible at exhaust waveforms. to me, I never get a good one. I don't even know if this one's a good one. It looks okay. It is moving. If I take it out of the tailpipe, it does go away. I don't have the signal anymore. But let me show you what I've got set up out here, I guess. So channel 1 is just pinned into my control wire, number 1. Channel 2 is my Cody's Auto Diagnostic pulse sensor on the intake. This is where the purge valve basically feeds in. So it's kind of basically a good pull on every cylinder. It's not like leaned over to one particular bank or anything like that. It's good central port to get nice even waveforms. And then, like I said, I've got the WPS back here in the back, and I actually tried to get this thing to where it stays steady in here, and it might not. You can see here, tailpipe's moving around a pretty good bit, and it makes the reading kind of skewed. Try to keep it to where the pipe itself isn't touching this pipe. I might not be very good at it. There we go. So, yeah. Anytime I use a pulse sensor back there, it just shakes so much that I get a terrible, terrible reading. So, on the scope there, you can see that if we pause this, our intake, so we're doing pulls, so we're going on the bottom side, we're looking for vacuum pulls. All right, all of them even across the board. If we go back a few pages, you can see we have very, very repeatable, almost identical intake waveforms. All right. Our exhaust down here, let's move this up out of the way. It's a little bit different. We're looking for pressure pushes, and then a vacuum would be a misfire or something like that. So we're looking for pressure pulses, and I'm not good with exhaust. I'm telling you. I don't think I ever really get a good, definitive, repeatable line or waveform like I can with intakes. Intakes always seem to turn out pretty good. Exhaust, I really don't know. They all look even as far as the general shape of them. We have a nice W on all of them, pretty much. We have kind of like an M at the top of all of them, except for, you know, like here, a little bit, it's a little wonky. I just don't know. I'm not good with exhaust. I don't take enough captures of them, and I don't have a tool that I really like using for them. So, I mean, realistically, yeah, they all kind of match for the most part. Pressure wise, for the most part, they're all pretty similar. I mean, we get some that are just kind of off, and then, you know, see, like this one right here spikes up a lot higher. I really don't know. I just don't. I have taken a Brandon Steckler class, and it doesn't help me with exhaust. I just feel like I don't have a good tool to get the captures. So until I'm confident in the tool, I don't particularly like trying to do captures. But either way, we can see that, you know, for the most part, we've got some pretty even exhaust pulses. We definitely have even intake pulls. So there is nothing weird, at least on our intake side at all, and not really anything drastically noticeable on the exhaust other than the occasional misfire, which I kind of think what's right here, just a misfire that kind of caused an issue or something. Not real sure, but just wanted to go over this real fast before we take off driving this thing and get some other live data recorded. All right, so I got the scan tool hooked up over here, just logging some data. We are at a hot idle right now. Do have the air conditioner on. I've turned it off just so that kind of, if that's affecting it, it'll go away. As you can see, intake manifold vacuum right now 4.8 psi, so about 5 psi roughly. Long-term trim -18, short-term trim -8, so that is taking about 26-27% total trim out. A lot of trim. Everything else looks okay. Our downstream oxygen sensor right now is switching, which isn't that big of a deal because we're just sitting here at idle. Our upstream air fuel ratio sensor is doing whatever they do. I don't understand them. So yeah, it's doing something. It's reading current. So ignition timing, we're doing 9.5 degrees before top dead center, so not really doing anything as far as a knock is concerned. No knock retardation going on. Yeah, so let's drive this and see what happens with our fuel trims. Right now you can see the short term is doing some weird stuff. Yeah, I don't know. This thing is weird how it acts. So let's just go drive it up the street. We'll get to a good cruising speed and see what these values look like while we're cruising. Cruising around 40 something mile an hour here, just taking it easy. And as we can see, our trims are still about a -25% total trim. We got relative throttle, looks good. Intake vacuum around 12 psi. So yeah, everything looks fairly normal to me, other than this fuel trim. Like it's rich. It's pulling fuel out for some reason. I don't understand. To me, everything I check seems pretty good. So, not really sure. You can see that our downstream oxygen sensor did kind of flatten out. It quit switching, which is what it's supposed to do. And then we just had a long fuel cut, so it went lean. Now, I will tell you that one day I was driving this thing and it did seem like my downstream stayed really lean for a long time driving it. Like while I was driving it, it was doing only like 1/10 of a volt or something. So it was almost like it was stuck lean, but if I messed with the throttle, it would kind of wake back up into a open loop situation, and my downstream would immediately react to that and come back up rich, and then once it went closed loop again, it went full lean again. So to me, when I was driving it, it actually looked like my upstream and downstream wasn't agreeing. Basically, like my upstream was reading rich, my downstream was reading lean. It's kind of what it looked like. So I did throw an oxygen sensor on this thing, an upstream one, because like I said, when I messed with the throttle and forced a open loop, it got extra fuel in there, and then it was back up and happy. So it was like it was pulling too much fuel out. So threw an oxygen sensor at it, didn't help. And when I took it out, it didn't look rich. When we get back to the shop, I'll get it and show it to you. But didn't look rich. But computer thinks it's rich. Oxygen sensor kind of is saying it's rich for some reason. To me, everything looks fine. So, me, I'm stumped on this one. To me, the only thing that could fix it from everything I've checked is, I think, 4 new injectors. I think all 4 injectors may be spraying too much, like they're the wrong injectors or something. But looking at them, they look stock. They look original. They look like they've been in there for a long time. So I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something, but I have no idea what I'm missing. So here's the sensor that I took out of it. Doesn't look like anything really wrong with it. It does look original. It's pretty old looking, but definitely doesn't look rich. It's not sooty at all. So I'm pretty stumped on this one. I really don't know what's wrong with it. I have really no idea where to go with it. I mean, my gut is fuel injectors, but do I want to throw $200 or $300 worth of fuel injectors at this thing? Not really. So some of you might know what's wrong with it. I have no idea. If you think you got an idea, leave it down in the comments. If you've got some questions about it, if you think I'm overlooking something, leave it down in the comments, because I'm pretty stumped and I'd like to know what's wrong with it. So hopefully you guys can help me figure it out. But thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you later.